Hi, this is Kim McAllister, and now we're going to talk about Chapter 26 about privacy and security. As you know from already being a registered nurse, privacy and security is something that's very serious and very important. I know you're already very familiar with HIPAA, and so we're not going to talk a whole lot about that. But what we're going to talk about is how electronic health records and informatics impacts privacy and vice versa. So we have an increased concern about security breaches. If you've listened to the news lately, it seems like some organization or company has suddenly been hacked and hundreds or thousands or hundreds of thousands of user information has been released. When that happens with healthcare information, that can be very serious indeed. And there's been an increase in the interest of hackers and other people who want to get this information. So part of our concern about that is due to the increased interest. Also, the increased number of users with access to health data. We also have increased types of health data, and we have an increased volume of health data that's been accumulated. We also have an increase in the number of devices that are being used to access the data. So all these things together combine to put a big strain on our privacy and security measures. And these are things that are not going to go away, and so we have to address them. So one of the things we want to talk about is privacy, which is the right of individuals to control access to their person and also to their personal information and healthcare information. Confidentiality has to do with protecting health information from inappropriate access or use, and also from inappropriate disclosure. We want to make sure that that information isn't being given to people who shouldn't have it. Also, we want to define what security is, and that's the administrative, technical, and physical safeguards that are put into place to prevent breaches of privacy or security. And believe it or not, this was addressed as far back as 1860 by our very own Florence Nightingale. She brought up the issue at that time when she wrote Notes on Nursing. If you haven't read that, I highly encourage you to. You will be amazed at what you'll learn that you'll already know, and what a huge impact she had on nursing. Also, we want to look at informational privacy, and that's protecting health information misuse by non-authorized personnel. Integrity is keeping data secure to preserve as a primal resource for knowledge. And you can look at Table 19-1 for more information about other definitions and concepts which are relevant to this discussion. It's the caregiver's requirement to protect the patient and to protect their safety and privacy and confidentiality. And we particularly want to do so with electronic health records and also in our patient handoffs. We have a vulnerability in the fact that all of our health information is placed on a computer, in the cloud, wherever, and it can be accessed. And that speed of access is important because it provides a lot of help in the situation of an emergency. If I can't tell you my histories or my allergies, you can pull it up on the computer and find that information, which is quite wonderful. The problem is that it's there and easily and readily accessible to people that shouldn't necessarily see it. And this is why a lot of systems now track who accesses and pulls up whose patient chart. So let's say somebody is in the hospital that you recognize and you want to find out what's going on with them. If you don't have any direct contact with that patient, you've just created a security breach by accessing someone's records that you shouldn't be accessing. So keep that in mind when you're working. If you get interested, don't go snooping. There is a code of ethics for health informatics professionals, and that was created in 2002. and it has two major parts. It addresses what the fundamental ethical principles are, and then it addresses the rules of conduct. And these code of ethics also include business ethics as well, because informatics is both a healthcare and a health-related field, but it also involves the use of business. And so we need to look at the code of business ethics as well when we're thinking about this. And we want to remember what patients' rights are. We're very familiar with the Patient Bill of Rights, but we also need to be aware of what their rights are in regards to information. And patients have the right to review their information, and they have the right to clear and complete presentation of that. They have their right to append or correct information. So if that information is incorrect, they can say, hey, this is wrong and you have to fix it. They can block the release of information. Generally, when patients are admitted, they're given a form and it has different check marks where you can say, I don't want this disclosed or that disclosed. Be sure that you read that and know what you can and what you can't disclose. They also have the right to protection for third-party release, and also for the integrity and the availability of the information. There is such a thing as fair information principles, and this is a set of internationally recognized principles for addressing privacy of information practices. It's a framework for policy laws, and these were developed by the US, Canada, and the European governments. And if you want to know more about this, look on page 438 in table 26.2. And this is also, this whole information principle can also be used to formulate your institution's privacy policies. So these are pretty powerful principles that can be used. Also know there's a National Privacy and Security Framework for Health and Professionals that provides principles for practice. And it also, again, provides the basis for privacy policies as well. There are laws and regulations guiding the practice. Internationally, there are European Union directives. Federally, everyone's familiar with HIPAA. And then there are state and federal collaborations. And I provided this link for the Health Information Security and Privacy Collaboration. Put my keyboard way over there for some reason. I want you to take a look at that link. And this is pretty cool. This has information about the different policies, and it has stuff about the High-Tech Act, which will be important in the next chapter. Also has information for providers and professionals, and can give you information about meaningful use. Meaningful use is important with electronic health records. If you can prove meaningful use, then if you are a Medicaid or a Medicare provider, then you can get financial incentives that will help cover your electronic health record. And there are different stages to meaningful use, and each stage has different objectives and what it will cover. And it was implemented by year to year, and you could find out more about that. This also has, oops, where do we go? This also has information for patients and families that you can provide. If their patients aren't sure, I don't know about this whole information technology thing, it gives you some information that you can use to educate patients. Has some fact sheets on information and what the benefits are, and different information about your health data, how you can check your health data. So this is really helpful. And then back to where we were with research policies and so forth. I think it's pretty cool. There are also secondary uses of electronic health data. It's used for public health monitoring or surveillance. During flu season, anybody that, if you're admitted for flu-related illness, it automatically goes to the public health and the CDC site. They track all the admissions and physician visits for flu-related illness. They also track the reported absences with schools and other businesses for flu-related illnesses. And there was a sudden uptick in that in 2009 and that's what triggered the response to H1N1. It was actually the U.S. Army, their surveillance system was a little more sensitive, and they picked it up before the CDC did. So this surveillance is really helpful in letting people know when there are issues and problems. So that's very helpful. There's also important guidelines on de-identification of data, and data can be de-identified when it's used for marketing. And there are two different ways under HIPAA that information can be de-identified. One is safe harbor, where 18 types of identifiers are removed, and there's no actual knowledge residual information that can be identified to the individual. So all the modifiers are removed. Expert determination, which is more useful to marketers. It has statistical or scientific principles that are applied. There is a very small risk that anticipated recipient could identify the individual. So with safe harbor, there's really no way to identify it. With expert determination, there can be some. The importance of information security. Oh, wait a minute. I want to go back just a minute to, I want to go back a minute to the public health monitoring surveillance. They have some goals. They educate the broad public sector about health and health services research on privacy and security. They focus on priorities related to privacy, and they balance the need for privacy with the need for public health and research data. And they develop PRISM, which stands for a Privacy Toolkit for Public Health Professionals. So you might want to Google PRISM and find out some information about that. So with public trust, we have a balance between privacy and society's need for improved efficiency and reduced costs. So we can get more efficiency by sharing more information. But we also want to make sure that when we do this, that we're maintaining public trust. And we do that by having adequate security measures, and that will decrease when there are breaches of privacy and security. And there have been quite a lot, and those have quite significant consequences. Understand that increased connectivity that we have now results in highly sensitive information that can be shared, that can be hacked into and lost. There is a common security framework that was developed to help healthcare organizations address standards and regulations to maintain security and privacy. And this was created by HITRUST, which is the Health Informatics Trust Alliance. And you can read more about that in box 26.6 on page 445. Increasing security threats also happen because patients can access their own information and make changes. And the data is very attractive to hackers, and they've even started holding some people's health data for ransom, which is quite interesting. There are legal requirements and fines for maintaining privacy and security. The largest fine as of, I believe it was 2015, is $4.3 million. Penalties under HIPAA can be as large as $68 million for organizations that don't have any security measures. So if you're starting your own healthcare organization, be absolutely certain you've got security measures in place that meet the criteria. Otherwise, you'll be out of business and in debt forever. In addition to the fines, there can be remediation cost, and this is like forensic analysis where you try to figure out where everything went wrong. You lose productivity because you're having to spend time and personnel on finding the cause and providing the solution and explaining how you're going to correct the problem and apologizing. You have to set up a call center for victims that were impacted by your security breach, and you can end up paying up to $1,000 per victim. There are increasing threats, and these are due to changes in practice. We have increased access, we have increased medical devices, a lot of portable devices, mobile devices, and people want patients to use the mobile devices because they find out that people actually utilize the data more on their smartphones and tablets than they do sitting down at an actual computer. And so when they can show that it's being used a lot, they make more money from that. And then the risk is, of course, when you are sharing more data and you're sharing it on a smartphone or a tablet, it's less secure than accessing it on a computer, so that causes problems. We have a lot of vulnerabilities, and these are external events where someone tries to hack in and bridge a firewall. They can also not only hack information, but also send malware or malicious messages. And a good way to avoid that is don't open any email at work that you're not sure of. Never respond to phishing. Don't give your passwords to anybody. If the security or your IT people need to get into your account, they're not going to ask you for your password. So protect your password. Don't give it to someone else. Don't let someone else log in with your information. Don't give someone your code to verify that you're the second witness to insulin or digoxin or other things, narcotics and so forth, because mistakes can be made, and also you can end up losing control of your information. There are also internal events, and that can be intentional. It can also be unintentional, like leaving your workstation or your cow without logging off. Sometimes people will shoulder surf in the hallway or shoulder surf in the patient room. Be aware of who's behind you when you're working on a patient. If there are people in the room trying to peer around and look, you can ask them to leave or turn the computer around where they can't see it. Sometimes it can be, IT personnel. It can be anybody in the hospital. So you just need to be really careful. So we have the competing desire to give patients access and give other people access so that we can support patient care, but we also have to limit access for security. And there can be competing priorities, and we can have problems with resources. We have to be sure that the regulations that we establish in the hospital don't prevent people from being able to do their job. That's what happened when HIPAA was first released back in '96. If you were working then, as I was, all of a sudden we couldn't take care of anybody because we couldn't talk about anybody, and so we couldn't share information. And so that law had to be very quickly modified so that we could actually take care of people. So we want to be sure that that never happens again. And so some of the ways that we manage security risk are administrative. With administrative, we want to establish policies and procedures and do administrative actions that prevent, detect, contain, also correct violations of security. And so this means we have to communicate. If you're in administration, you have to communicate across the entire organization. Talk to users, talk to IT talk to everyone who's involved so that we're not making regulations and we're not putting things in place that are going to prevent people being taken care of. You also have to identify risk and then also develop the safeguards for them. You need to conduct risk assessment and risk analysis as well. And if you're not familiar with that yet, if you haven't taken leadership in management or financial management, we're offering that in Summer B. And so you're going to learn more about conducting risk assessments and analysis then. Our technical procedures, we have to have the correct authentication. And we have to manage our access, make sure that people are getting into things that are supposed to and people that aren't are not. We have to encrypt our data. We have to provide protection from malware. We also have to have a disaster recovery plan for the data. Most places now will have a copy of their information placed at an off-site server somewhere, so you should know kind of what your backup plan is. Sometimes the system will go down and you'll have to do paper charting, and then that information has to be put back into the computer. But what I'm talking about is when the hospital maybe part of the hospital is damaged, or there's a huge accident or a huge weather event like Hurricane Katrina or something that takes out the infrastructure so that the backup power comes on, the backup power runs out, and then where are you? We also have to look at managing and providing physical methods to safeguard privacy. That may be something like controlled access to the building or controlled access to certain areas in the hospital. Workstation security, secure portable devices with a cable so they don't walk away. Actual devices that are put into place, such as security guards, 2 forms of ID in order to access information, alarm systems, fire suppression systems, power redundancy, and so on. Also disabling USB ports. Some places have stopped putting USB ports on the computers so that information can't be downloaded and removed from the hospital. And here you have a list of resources that you can look at for more information about this. And then because IT develops at a rapid pace, we have to keep track of that. So if you have an electronic health system, you've got to always be working and making sure that the patient's information is protected and that confidentiality is maintained. And this can be really hard in this day and age.